the reason it's the angle of elevation is because it's as if you're standing there and you're looking up. Like you're
Uh-huh.
sort of your eye level's here, but you're really looking up. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, that's what I have. That's kind of like the definition that I have written in my notes too.
So we'll talk about it more clearly here in another problem, but they give you all the angles, so you don't have to do much in terms of like figuring out where it is. They've already labeled the triangle, and you're trying to find x. Okay, so what you have to really take away or extract from there is that you're given an angle and this 100. Now, is this 100? And there's three possibilities. Is it the adjacent? Is the opposite? Or is it the hypotenuse? This 100.
It's the hypotenuse.
Hypotenuse, and x would be what of those three?
The opposite.
Opposite. So which of the trig functions that you're supposed to know by this point uses the opposite and the hypotenuse?
Um, I think it's tangent.
So here, I've got it written down here. So
No,
Kato,
it's sine.
yeah, it's sine. Now you have to know this, like you have to know this the way you know something else that's really important to you if you want to do well in this class. So
Uh-huh.
there's conventions. I can help you with that. There's songs. You can go to TikTok and find something. Like doesn't matter. Like find a way to remember this, right? It's
Yeah.
it's 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 necessary. So the sine of 52 degrees equals, and then it's the opposite over the hypotenuse like this. Is that familiar to you? Is that something you've seen in class?
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to substitute in values for those. So which do we know? Is it the opposite or the hypotenuse?
The hypotenuse is 100 and the opposite is x.
That's right. X over 100 like this. Okay. Now the sine of 52 is a number. Okay, it's not a friendly number. It's not like 3 or something nice. It's a decimal. It's awkward. It's weird, but it is a number. Okay.
Mhm.
You're solving for x. Your goal is to get x by itself. How do you undo division by 100?
You would multiply sine 52 times 100.
Multiply both sides by 100, and that cancels. Now you're
Yeah.
allowed to use a calculator for sure in this part of the course. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, before you go to your calculator, very important, the mode has to be in what's called degrees.
Yeah, I
Okay.
got that.
All right. So if you got a calculator handy, I'll do the same. I do not recommend you use your phone, even though maybe it's more convenient. You want to practice the way you're going to take this test or quiz whenever you've got that. But what do you have an answer for me in this?
Yeah, just give me a second.
Sure.
I got 78.80.
Good. Okay. Now, how many decimal points to go out to? I don't know. Ask your teacher, verify in the test or
To the
quiz.
nearest hundredth, so
Eight.
78.801.
So the hundredth actually ends right there.
Oh,
Just
okay.
as a reminder, it's 10th, and then the hundredth is the second one after the decimal point.
Oh, yeah.
And that one rounds goes down. Okay. More important than that, though, the rounding, I mean, rounding's kind of important, but the more important is the units. What are the units of height in this problem?
Feet.
Feet. Yeah. So your teacher's looking for that as well.
Cool.
Okay, so if you write all this down, you have probably satisfied everything that's there. If a sketch is not provided, draw and label it, write the equation we did, solve the equation, you did that, and then you put it in the calculator and you round it to the appropriate units. Okay.
Mhm.
So this style of question is much easier because the picture has been drawn for you. So we're gonna come back and do number 2, but let's look at number 3. Actually, no, I take that back. Let's do number 2. It's more like number 1. Number 2, you have to draw the picture. Okay. Now you don't have to give a very accurate drawing. It just needs to have a triangle in it. Okay. And we can talk about this now. All right, from the top of a vertical cliff 40 meters high, the angle of depression of an object that is level with the base of the cliff is 34 degrees. Okay, so again, kind of angle of depression. I don't know if it's a great name for it, but it's this angle right here. This is the angle of depression. Okay, because you're on top of a cliff, we presume. Let's say you're on the cliff here. Okay. And they're saying that the angle of depression is the one going down. Now there is this relationship, this really important relationship between the angle of depression and the angle of elevation. So this is the angle of depression right here. This is the angle of elevation right here. And they are the same. And that comes from, if you recall earlier in a geometry class, you learned that two parallel lines cut by a transversal, alternate interior angles are congruent. You might have remembered that. Might not. Doesn't really matter, but they are actually the same. It's perspective. It's like if you're descending, like if you're on an airplane or you're jumping off a cliff, that's depression. If it's ascending, like you're taking off on an airplane or you're looking up, that's elevation. Okay, so we've got to kind of label this triangle appropriately. Now the cliff is 40 meters high. So we'll presume there's water down there at the bottom. So it's 40 meters high. Okay. And they're giving you the angle of depression. So they're saying the angle of depression is 34 degrees.
Okay.
Now I actually find this drawing kind of awkward, which is why I made this other one over here. If we draw the rest of the triangle, or this other side of this, which is the 34 degrees, is also, like I mentioned, it's this one here. This is also 34 degrees down here. And then the height's still 40. So what I'm trying to show you here is that this bottom triangle is the one that's a little more useful for us.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what are we trying to find? Are we trying to find, and I'll label two things here, X and D. Which are we trying to find in this problem when it says how far is the object from the base of the cliff? How far is the object from the base of the cliff? Are we asking for X? We're asking for D.
X.
Yes. All right. So again, kind of like the last problem here. Relative to the angle of 34, what is 40 and what is X? And your answer choices are opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse.
So 40 is the opposite and X is the adjacent.
So you got to know this. Go ahead.
Tangent.
Yes. So it's always the tangent of an angle. In this case, it's 34 degrees equals opposite over adjacent, like that. Now, are you given those values? Yes, you're given that the opposite is 40 and the adjacent is X. Okay, which is good because we only want one unknown. So again, the tangent of 40 is a number. I recommend waiting until the end to calculate it. We got to get X out of the bottom. Do you remember from class or from a previous lecture at school, how do you get the variable out of the bottom?
I have it right here. I think you have to divide by, or well, we would put the X, multiply it both sides by X.
Yes, good
and then
words.
divide by tangent 34.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, that's right. So I'm going to write out the steps here in case you want to look back at this later on. You divide both sides by tangent 34. So X equals 40 over tangent 34. Grab your calculator whenever you're ready and let me know what you come up with for that, rounding to the nearest hundredth.
59.30.
Good. Any units to go along with that?
Meters.
Meters, yeah. So the hardest part, in my opinion, is drawing the picture. If you've not seen this scenario before, like if you've never gone cliff jumping, if you've, I mean, there's not, I don't know if there's anywhere around here to do that, but like
Hmm.
sometimes there's scenarios where you're not sure about. I think it's reasonable actually to ask your instructor, like, hey, do I got the right picture here? Is this what you're looking for? They will sometimes hint, tip their hat that you got it right or wrong.
Yeah.
Um, just as an aside there. Any questions on that before we move to number 3?
Uh, no.
Okay, number 3. All right. Airplane takes off 200 yards in front of a 60-foot building. So here's an immediate problem that I notice. Have you taken chemistry yet?
Yeah, I'm taking it this year.
Taking it already. Okay, so there's a conversion problem. Like one's
Hmm.
in yards, one's in feet. Okay, that's bad. They have to match. Like you can't mix units. If you
Yeah.
play sports, you know all about that. You gotta everything consistent. So your choice here is to convert everything to feet or everything to yards. There is no right answer, but does one stand out to you, or do you have an opinion on that?
I mean, I guess it would be less units if we converted yards, or I mean, other way around, if we converted feet into yards.
Okay. So we may have to come over to the side. 60 feet times, that's why I asked you if you did in chemistry. It's how many
Hmm.
feet are in a yard or how many yards are in a foot.
Uh, 3 feet in a yard.
Good. Units cancel. So that becomes 20 yards.
Okay.
It's kind of a morbid problem here. Plane crashing into a building. That's really awful. I know the previous problem was jumping off a, a cliff. I don't know. It's you maybe ask your teacher about that tomorrow. So again, sometimes it's better to just draw the triangle without all the distractions. X 220 here. So you're trying to find the angle. That's different. In the previous problems, they gave you the angle, but you still do the same sort of work here. You say, okay, relative to the angle, what are the numbers? And again, your answers are opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. What are you given here?
We're given the opposite and the adjacent.
So which trig function is that?
Tangent.
Okay, so we're going to say the tangent of x. We don't know x. That's why we're leaving it there, but we do know that it's 20 over 200.
200.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, do you remember from class how to undo tangent?
Oh, no.
So on your calculator, there's a button called tan inverse, like that, and
Oh,
we're gonna need to
oh,
use that.
arcsine.
Yeah, arctan, arc cosine,
Uh-huh.
arc sine. I'm just showing you the steps here. What most students end up doing is just going right down here to this line where it's the tan inverse of 20 over 200, like that. All right, so the tan inverse undoes tan. Again, and not super important that you know that. It's more important that you recognize that if you don't have the angle, you're going to use the inverse for that, whether it's sine inverse, cosine inverse, tan inverse. And you're just
Yeah.
going right to your calculator. Your result is a degree. So you're going to want to round that to 2 decimal places.
Sorry, well,
You're going to want to
I
round
missed
that to 2
it.
decimal places, your degree measurement.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
grab a calculator and let me know what you come up with here.
5.71.
Degrees. And that is your final answer.
Cool.
So there's kind of this important fork that you might want to think about when you're working on these triangle problems. And the fork is, am I solving for a side or am I solving for an angle? So in the last problem, we were solving for an angle and you used the inverse ones. When you're solving for a side, you're going to use the sine, the cosine, and the tangent as is. So it's a good sort of like, and you do this when you're probably boxing. I mean, you look at an opponent and you make a decision. I'm going to do this or I'm going to do this, or anything else in life, right? So math is no different. You can choose kind of the direction, the path you're going to go down when you're looking at it. So when we look at this next problem 4, I want you to tell me, are we solving for a side or an angle? All right, so the problems are on screen, or if you want to read it to yourself, tell me if we're solving for a side or an angle.
14-foot ladder. An angle.
Yes, and that's right there. All right, so here, there's a few different ways to draw this. I'm going to give you some options here. One is, this is your wall and here's the ladder. The other is, here's the wall and here's the ladder. Do either of these stand out to you? Which one you
The
might?
one on the left.
Okay, good. Okay, so it's probably important to even say that. Okay, wall, ladder, like that. All right. Now, where does the I'm gonna, and let me actually let me label these. Let me go A, B, and C. Which is 14 and which is 13?
C is gonna be 14, and then B is gonna be 13.
Good. Okay. Now the angle of elevation is this right here. Call that X. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So again, relative to X, what are you given? What's the 13? What's the 14?
We're the opposite and the hypotenuse.
So which trig
Sine.
function sine? So it's sine of X equals opposite over hypotenuse, 13 over 14. So just like in the previous problem, you're going to undo the trig function with the inverse. So this time it's sine inverse.
Over 14 equals arc sine.
Yes.
X. Oh, wait, X equals. Okay. So then. So 62.21.
Yes. 62.21
Or
degrees.
68.21, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see that either. Degree symbol, pretty important there. Okay. So let's see how far we can get on the next one. All right, so this is really similar. All right, so the lesson's we'll go to about, we'll just see if we can quickly work this one out, but typical lessons are an hour. Gives us a chance to also cover other stuff if needed, but
yeah.
Let's take a look here. So a person stands at the window of a building, so his eyes are 12.6 meters above the level ground. So here's the person, and they're looking out, and they're 12.6 above the ground. And there's an object on the ground 58.5 meters away. This is not to scale. This time they want the angle of depression. So the angle of depression, it's such an awkward thing. This is the angle of depression up here. But like I mentioned earlier, it's the same as this angle down here. And that might be something to get clarity on from class.
Right.
Just because we're running out of time here, the tangent of X is 12.6 over 58.5. So X is going to be the tan inverse of 12.6 over 58.5, like that.
Okay.
And get that number here for you.
12.5. So
This one ends up being 12.15 degrees.
yeah.
All right, so